The heat rumbled low inside the wall of the Marlowe house, the kind of dry autumn hum that blurred into background noise most evenings. Dim golden light spilled from the overhead living room lamp, casting long shadows across the worn fabric of the sectional couch. Backpacks lay scattered across one end, half-empty soda cans sat on the coffee table, and the faint smell of burnt microwave popcorn still hung thick in the air. All 5 brothers were crowded into the room, sprawled across cushions and the carpet, lost in their own separate worlds. Ethan leaned against the armrest, scrolling through college planning emails on his laptop. Jasper yelled quiet encouragement at a football game playing on the television. Miles sat hunched over a paperback novel, headphones slung loosely around his neck. Cooper and Bo roughhoused on the floor, shoving one another and snickering under their breath. No one paid attention to the small 6-year-old girl standing near the edge of the rug, Lila's bare feet pressed against the cool woven carpet. Her small hands hung loose at her side. Inside her chest, every memory burned sharp and unsoftened. The lonely nights tucked in a cold bed, the way her voice would disappear when she tried to call for her brother, the quiet, hopeless end of her last short. She remembered every time she had chased, tugged at sleep, begged for a glance, for 5 minutes of their time. She remembered how they had always turned. That little girl who craved their love was gone. Reborn back at 6 years, she carried all that grief fully awake behind her calm, dark eyes. She did not. She simply stood there watching. It was Bo who first knew. He pulled away from shoving Cooper and glared, his brow. Hey, what are you doing just... His voice was loud enough to cut through the low murmur. One by one, the others dragged their focus over. Ethan closed his laptop. Jasper muted. Miles lifted his gaze. The noise in the room drained away peace, until only the heater's distant 5 pairs of brotherly eyes settled on their leader. They expected tears, or a request, or a plea for someone to read. The same thing she had always asked. Lila took one. Her voice so quiet they all had to lean in just to hear each. I don't want you to love. The words hung suspended in the warm air. Cooper. Bo's playful grin vaguely. Jasper's mouth fell. Ethan sat still, his expression shifting from mild boredom into some. Miles set his knee, his fingers tightening. None of them had ever heard their little sister like this. There was no anger, no tantrum, no sobs. It was a plain wish, spoken with the heavy certainty of someone. Jasper was the first to be quiet, confused, about. Of course. He shifted forward couch cushions, reaching out like he wanted to ruffle her hair the way. Stepped back. A small automatic flinch pulled her shoulder to her ears. She kept her steady on him, looking down, yet not. You never did, gently. I needed. I don't want to wait either. Tilted his head, his logical mind scrambling to make what he was hearing. At 20, he was solving problems. The reason. This mood, right? Did anything happen at school? Upset about a toy? He tried to frame it as frustration, something temporary that tomorrow. She shook her head. There was no childishness in her features. Something ancient and tired lived in those small eyes. It isn't a bad mood. Or. Miles frowned, his thoughts already spinning. He could not pinpoint what felt wrong, only that everything a moment felt off. His little sister, not the one who used to true the house. There were scraps of attention. The girl standing before them. Cooper sat comfortably on the floor, chest. That's messed up. Would you say something like that? Not answer his question. She only looked slowly across 5 brothers in turn, seeing every set of eyes. She saw the confusion, the defensiveness, the faint flicker of hurt start faces. They could not understand where this came from. They held no memory of the lived and lost. They only knew that the sister they were used to vanishing right in front of them. The old dynamic where she chased their approval shattered complete living room. Bold and uncertain. What do you want then, Lila? I want us to love you. Beat, she said nothing. They hummed. Outside, car rolled past on the street. Tires crunched autumn leaves. Waited, suspended, you might say next. Whatever answer came, nothing in this would ever go back to the way it used to be. The heavy quiet lingered long after Lila had turned and walked out of the living room. Her small, sock-covered feet made almost no sound against the carpet as she retreated down the hallway toward her bedroom, leaving her 5 brothers frozen amid scattered backpacks and half-empty soda cans. The television sat muted, casting faint flickering light across their stunned faces, and the heater continued its monotonous low rumble, as if nothing profound had just unfolded. Bo was the first to move. He pushed himself up off the floor, hands hanging loosely at his sides, and glanced toward the empty hallway. She didn't answer me, he mumbled, confusion thick in his tone. I asked what she wanted and she just left. Jasper grabbed the remote and snapped the TV off entirely, killing the last of the room's background noise. Restless frustration boiled just beneath his skin. At 17, he was used to loud, simple fights and quick apologies, not this cold, heavy kind of sadness coming from a 6-year-old. It's just a phase. Kids say weird stuff when they're mad. Probably got upset over something trivial at kindergarten. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knee, trying to convince himself as much as the other. Ethan shook his head slowly. His brow was furrowed, his college laptop forgotten on the couch. That didn't feel like a tantrum. There was no yelling, no tears. She sounded sure of herself, too sure for her. He replayed her words inside. I don't want you to love me. The sentence looked sharp and unsaid. Miles picked up his paperback but did not open. His fingers traced the worn edge of the book, his mind turning over old half-forgotten moments. He could picture Lila trailing behind them through the house, tapping on bedroom doors, asking someone to play board games or look at her drawing. Most of the time they had brushed. He had brushed. A faint twist of guilt settled in it. But he pushed, uncertain what to. Maybe Mom or Dad should. They know how to handle. Cooper did, slumping back against the base. What do we do? Go beg her to be again? Creepy. 1 minute she's petting us, the next she says she doesn't. The brothers drifted apart after, each carrying their own tangled mix of confusion, and faint. No one went straight to the room. Instead they went to dinner, hoping that food and routine might smooth everything back to how it has been. When Mrs. Marlowe called them into the kitchen 20 later, the smell of spaghetti and tomato sauce wrapped through the dinners. Their mother looked worn out from her long shift at the office, dark circles already distracted by tomorrow's schedule, scribbled on a sticky note stuck to the fridge. Mr. Marlowe was stuck late at a constraint and would not make it home meal. Lila was already seated at the far end table, sitting straight in her chair. She picked at her pasta stick fork, quiet. She did not glance up when her brothers filed into the room, and Jasper sat closest to her, deciding. He grabbed a garlic bread slice and set it at the edge of her plate, forcing a cone. Your favorite. It was the kind of small, easy gesture he would have tossed go. Something meant to make her smile and return. Lila's fork food. She stared at the piece for a second, then gently pushed it back. But I don't want it. Faded. Come on, don't be stubborn. Love garlic bread. I used to, replied softly. But accepting nice thing. All converse died. The clink of fights stopped. Ethan set down his thud. Wide-eyed, shoulders drooped. Jasper felt embarrassed his cheeks. His simple attempt to reset their relationship rejected. He pulled the bread back, setting it onto his and fell silent. His spaghetti. Mrs. Marks between her children, picking up on the shin hanging over dinner, to untangle it fully. Going on with everyone tonight. Why is nobody talking? No brother wanted to explain the strange, gut-chilling line in the living room. It's ridiculous spoken out loud, possible for a small child. Trying to downplay it, just sibling. After dinner, the boys lingered in the kitchen. Their mom cleaned pot sink, out of earshot. Disagreement flared. We should trying. Sit and Bo suggested, his voice earnest. Cooper rolls. What's the point? Us away again. Bo's not wrong. Miles cut in quietly. But we can't. Nothing changed. Jasper's palm lightly against the counter, spilling over. So we just do nothing? Let her walk around acting like we don't exist? Held up one hand to quiet them. The practical oldest brother from the chaos. We'll take slow. Big speeches. If we keep showing up, the mood will pass. Later that night, Jasper wandered down the upstairs hallway with a stuffed rabbit he had worn at a county fair the year before. He paused beside Lila's closed bedroom doors hovering over the wood. He told himself this would work. A familiar toy. He knocked once. From behind came clear and calm. I want to be alone. Jasper stood there, the stuffed rabbit heavy. He did not open the door. He could not bring himself to push and explicitly told him to leave. The easy assumption that this was only childish badger started cracking apart inside him. A cold, easy feeling settled low and he realized for the time, this might not blow over. Whatever shift had to his little sister was not temporary. He turned and walked the room, still clutching the rabbit, his mind replaying every time and her off without a second thought. Somewhere in those fades, he started to suspect, lay the reason for all of this. Morning light seeped thin and gray through the kitchen windows the next day. Mrs. Marlowe left early for work, scribbling a quick note on the refrigerator door reminding the boys to keep an eye on Lila while she stayed home from kindergarten with a minor cold. Mr. Marlowe had already headed out before sunrise for a long-distance job site. Gone for the whole day. The house belonged entirely to the 5 brothers and their little sister. Lila came downstairs long after most of them were awake. She wore soft, faded pajamas, her hair messy around her face, and moved slowly toward the counter to pour herself a glass of water. She did not seek anyone's attention, did not ask for help, just reached for the plastic cup on the lower shelf all by herself. Ethan watched her from across the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. Last night's unease had not faded. He had lain awake late turning over her words, trying to fit them to the 6-year-old he thought he knew. Jasper had kept the stuffed rabbit on his nightstand all. When Lila turned to walk back toward the stairs, he stepped into her path, blocking her. Can we just for... His tone was less brash than it had been. Sleep had worn down some of his frustration, leaving raw confusion. Lila. She tilted her head slightly, eyes. What? I want to make better, Jasper. He held out the fuzzy rabbit. This is... You loved it once. Maybe we can out, watch cartoon. She did not reach away. She stepped sideways, trying to move. I don't need more. And I don't want to watch cartoon. Jasper moved. For a heartbeat irritation. And she kept. Why are you born? We are others. Family is supposed to. The comment hung sharp in the kitchen. Cooper leaned in the doorway, watching, while Miles and Bo stood. Lila sensed. Something weary flashed across her. Family, just a word, Lee. You get to choose people. You chose not me before. I don't want to pretend. Jasper tightened. It's too. Not knowing does not make the... Lila even, no yelling, no tears. It made her heavier. She ducked around him at the stairs, leaving the brothers standing in. Tempers free. The boys circled around Lila like people approaching some sharp. Bo knocked on her door multiple times, offering coloring books. Each time she politely but firmly to leave her be. Cooper grew annoyed, complaining to Miles in the hallway that she acted as if they had double. Ethan grew convinced they needed her to open up, to break through these walls around herself. Early afternoon, over. Ethan gathered all 4 brothers in the upstairs hallway right outside the room. His voice was low, controlled but firm. We cannot keep letting her away in there. If she's cooped up alone all day, it'll only get worse. She is sick. Be by herself. Lifted uncomfortably. Really want space. We might only by pushing. She is 6, Ethan countered. Kids her age they truly need, reluctantly. Cooper but said nothing. Against quiet misgivings, Ethan hit the doorknob. It was unlocked. He pushed the door open a few intermission. Lila sat in the middle of her bed, flicked her book. When the door swung inward with lifted her head. Fear flickered across her face for a split second, rising fast. She scrambled backward until it bored. Please, don't. Only trying, Ethan said. He stepped partway into the room, in the doorway. Talk to her. Tell us what is wrong. You are not, Lila said, her voice shaking time since her rebirth. You are exactly what you always did. Without asking me. Jasper stepped forward, caught between guilt and the urge to fix everything. Sister back. There is no going back. Lila's arms tight around her knee. Her eyes glistened, yet she refused to cry. That little girl everywhere is gone. Miles could feel in the small bedroom. He wanted to argue, to say they meant well. But the hurt underneath her words. He glanced at his brothers, realizing they were trampling over the very so hard to set. Ethan, he whispered. Ethan ignored him. Not shut your whole family out. Not how this works. At that, Lila pushed herself off the... She walked straight past them, slipping through the gap in the doorway, and marched down the hallway toward the far end of the hall. Turned the lock with a sharp click. Empty upstairs. 5 brothers stood alone in her bedroom, open picture book. They're hoping to pull her out of her shell, and they had entirely. Out a long breath. Herself in the guest room. Bo's voice was, "We messed up, didn't we?" Stared at the closed door, down, confidence cracking. He had thought tensions would solve. Now he understood. He could not force her trust. Could not for how hard he tried. Of their pushy goodwill was plain. Lila would no longer used to be hers. Outside the guest room doors fell into a heavy hush. Somewhere behind that locked wood, Lila sat in unfamiliar surroundings, safety she knew how to get. Stood grasping a bitter new truth. Their attempts to repent had only made the rift wider. Dusk painted the upstairs hallways in muted gray light long before their mother returned home. The lock on the guest room door stayed clicked shut, and Lila had not emerged once since she'd fled there hours earlier. The 5 brothers scattered through the house, split by sharp, unresolvable disagreement about what they ought to do next. No single plan felt right, and every choice carried a fresh risk of pushing Lila even farther away. Ethan retreated to his desk in his bedroom, scrolling through articles online about withdrawn childhood behavior. He still clung to the quiet belief that Lila's reaction stemmed from some unspoken hurt, something a grown-up could diagnose and mend. He jotted quick notes on a scrap of paper, half convinced a trip to a child therapist might untangle all of this. To him, pushing for answers still felt like responsibility, not intrusion. Down the hall, Jasper paced back and forth in front of the closed guest room door. Guilt gnawed at him relentlessly. He kept replaying the kitchen confrontation, the way Lila had stepped around him when he offered the stuffed rabbit. Part of him burned to apologize face to face, to beg for a chance to make amends. Another part seethed with frustration that she would not give them even the smallest open. Every time he lifted his hand to he froze. remembering how badly their last attempt to reach her had backfired. Miles settled on the top step of the staircase, staring toward the guest. He could not shake the image of Lila scrambling back against her headboard when Ethan forced open her bedroom. He argued silently inside his own. Their intentions had been kind, yet they had completely ignored what she told them she knew. He thought they should leave her alone, respect the lock, and wait until she chose to come out on her own. But he hesitated to stand against the brother everyone had always looked to for decisions. Cooper hung around the basement recreation, venting his irritation. Neon glow from a game console cast blue light over his frustrated. It's like she's punishing all of us for stuff we barely even remembered. We were just teenagers. How were we supposed to notice every little thing? He tossed a foam basketball against the cinder block, the ball bouncing with dulls. Now she's holed up in the guest room acting like we're all terrible. Bo leaned against the pool table, conflict written across his young face. He wanted to side, yet he could not forget the hollow quiet in Lila's voice the night she'd spoken. What if we really didn't? What if all those times we brushed her off hurt more than that? Come on. Little kids get over. Their voices carried out well, faint, clear. Miles heard every word from the love, and his chest veer. The brother fracturing, some guilt, some clinging to logicals, none seeing the full picture of what married. None of them knew she held the memories of an entire short, lone. They only saw a 6-year-old girl who When Mrs. Marlowe's car pulled away, the front door key, tired from her hospital shift, she walked in dropping her work bag away, immediately sensing the oppressive stillness hang the house. No laughter, no yelling, none of the usual chaotic noise of 5 boys. Sister, Lila, she called out. The brothers gathered awkwardly at the doors. Ethan stepped forward to explain, choosing him. He told their mother about Lila's strange quiet in the living room, about locking herself. He omitted the exact of her wish, softening it to all. Don't come out. We tried to check on her man. Worry creased Lila's face. She dragged across her forehead, worn thin. Today, no one could answer. None of them had thought to bring food or water. They had been so wrapped up in arguing to fix her that they overlooked the most. Guilt washed over it. Mrs. Marlowe grabbed a small fruit slices, a juice box. She knocked the door. Lila, it's Mom. Brought you something to eat. I'll set it outside the door, okay? You can. There was a reply from inside. She set the plate down on the rack. That evening, the family needed to run a quick supermarket errand for groceries Mr. Marlowe would need work trip. Mrs. Marlowe did not want to leave Lila home alone. Against my quiet protest, she woke Lila and insisted come along to the store, hoping the change of spirits. Lila said nothing, simply pulled on her jacket and van. Fluorescent lights hummed over the store. Shopping cart wheel linoleum. Mrs. Marlowe scanned items behind, toward the candy aisle, just glancing over at Lila, the cart. He thought this might be his chance for apology. When their mother turned away at canned soup prices, Jasper knelt down Lila's small. I'm sorry for thing. I really am. Come back to how things used to be. Lila stared at the floor. We can't go back. That life killed me once. The word out before she could. It was not loud, only a soft murmur. Jasper heard every syllable. His been cold. He confused and unsettled. It killed you once. Flickered across Lila's face. She clamped her mouth shut and stepped away from her mother's side. Jasper stood in the middle of the supermarket aisle, replaying a haunting line. He had no frame of reference for what she could possibly. She was 6 years old, never been close to death in this life, yet the raw conviction in her tone could not be nation. Mrs. Marlowe finished loading groceries into them toward the checkout. Jasper didn't Lila for an explanation. He trailed after the rest of his family, his spinning with that cryptic sentence. The brothers disagreed, already torn their unity apart, and now this one odd comment planted a terrifying, unanswered Jasper's head. What had their little Lee seen, or lived through, that no one else knew about? Rain lashed against the Marlowe house windows that night, autumn storm winds whistling around the roof edges. Fat raindrops drummed steadily on the glass, drowning out much of the neighborhood noise. Mr. Marlowe still had not come home from his out-of-town construction job, leaving Mrs. Marlowe to juggle household worries alone. Back from the grocery run, Lila retreated straight to the guest room and clicked the lock shut behind her once more. The plate of fruit their mother had left earlier was gone. She had eaten while everyone was out. Jasper could not shake what he had heard in the supermarket aisle. That life killed me once. The phrase circled endlessly inside his head as he paced his bedroom. He kept telling himself it was just a weird turn of speech from a small, upset child, but the weight in Lila's voice refused to be dismissed. No ordinary 6-year-old talked about being killed by a past life. Downstairs in the dim living room, he found Ethan hunched over his lap, reading articles about childhood trauma. Jasper shut the television off without asking permission, drawing his oldest brother's full attention. I heard something at the store, Jasper began, voice tight and careful not to carry sound toward the upstairs hall. Lila said something that's been bothering me ever since. Ethan closed his browser tab and leaned back in the couch. What did she? Jasper repeated the line word. Ethan's brow. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Kids mix up feelings and fantasies when they. It doesn't have to mean literally. Yet even it, doubt flickered across his. He thought back to her unchildlike certainty the night she spoke. Miles wandered down a few meters, overhearing fragments of their conversation. He sank into air, rain streaking the window. What if it isn't? He asked. What if she's carrying some kind of pain? Something deeper than regular. Cooper and Bo joined the after. The 5 brothers gathered in the half-dome room, storm noise wrapping her house, reeling over Lila's. None dared go knock on the door. They feared pressing her would only drive her inward. Jasper kept trying to dig up memories, small forgotten moments before. He pictured Lila standing alone, holding drawings no one at, calling their names. Fragments rose. Birthday parties where everyone fussed over the boys' sports trophies while her gifts sat unopened table. Cold winter evenings she sat on the stairs waiting for someone to read her story, only to fall in. Guilt crashed over Jasper's. He had written those moments off as noble at the time. They were just tiny, forgettable pieces of life to him. Now he understood those small slights for her. Upstairs, behind the room door, Lila sat curled on top. Her small hands gripped the thin blanket. She could hear the low murmur of the brothers' voices drifting downstairs. She hated that she had let that dangerous sentence slip. This moment, and she had given Jasper a hint of the truth. Fear caught in her chest. If they guessed even a fraction of her real past, she had no idea how Emily would react. Think she was crazy? Lock her away? Send her to some kind of institution? Old terror from her previous stirred inside her. She pressed her head to her knees, fighting back the rise of a full. Her breath quickened, fast and shallow. Quiet rejection. Every lonely night from her prior existed at once. Downstairs, the brothers' conversation. Cooper still built. We were teenagers. We had school, sports, friends. We couldn't drop everything every attention. Bo shook his head. We didn't over most of the time. Once. Tempers nearly flared between them until a sharp, quiet sound through the rumble of thunder. A soft, muffled sob came drifting down the Lila. She was crying. Locked guest room door. The noise was faint, almost by the storm outside. In the room heard it. All instantly. No more excuses. The sound between them. Mrs. Marlowe, who had been sorting laundry, heard it too. Climbed the stairs slowly. Room door. Lila, baby, are you all right? There was no answer, only more quiet weeping. Mrs. voice softened. I won't. Right out here. She lingered in the hallway for several long before returning downstairs, her face lined with worry. It's really hurting that little, she told the boys. I'm calling in first thing tomorrow morning. Get her evaluated. Words landed hard on every brother. The possibility of Dr. Vitt's assessments, therapy, forced them to face the real-world consequences overlooked. Later, after their mother had gone to bed, stayed up alone in the living room, while against the windows. He flipped through a stack of old family in the hall closet. Page after page showed Sockham's, high school graduations, birthday celebrated by the 5 boys. Lila only a handful of snapshots, all off to one side of group shots, center of anyone's focus. One blurry photo caught her staring at her brothers while they laughed together, a lonely, distant, or small face. Miles traced her with his fingertip. A question formed in his mind, aloud to the others. What if Lila carried memories she should ever possess? Thunder rolled across the side. Upstairs, the guest room stayed firmly clicked into place. Lila had weathered her surge, but her fear had sharpened. One accidental cracked her carefully built shield, and now at least one of her brothers suspected there was more than childish hurt. The crisis of this household had well and truly arrived. The storm had blown itself out by dawn, leaving behind damp pavement and gray, overcast skies. Mrs. Marlowe was up before anyone else, phone pressed to her ear as she called Lila's pediatric clinic. The receptionist scheduled an afternoon appointment, and a referral for a child therapist was added on top. News of the doctor's visit spread quickly through the house once the boys stumbled out of their bedrooms. A heavy, helpless mood hung over every room. Lila emerged from the guest room only to use the bathroom, slipping silently down the hallway with her head bowed. She avoided eye contact with all her brothers before locking herself back inside. She knew about the doctor appointment. She had overheard her mother's phone call through the thin guest room wall. Dread settled cold in her bones. She understood what these evaluations meant. Doctors would ask her to talk about her feelings, to to unpack pain she could never fully explain without revealing she had lived another entire life. If she spoke even fragments of her truth, everyone would label her disturbed. There would be tests, evaluation, maybe even being sent away from home. That fear gnawed at her steadily through the morning. Mr. Marlowe drove home mid-morning from his out-of-town work. Weary from long days on the construction, he dragged his duffel bag through the front. He had only gotten fragmented text updates from it and knew almost nothing of how deeply fractured the household had been. At first he treated the tension as ordinary sibling "Kid, she'll snap out of it sooner," he said over coffee but the exhaustion on his wife's and the quiet guilt weighing on each of his slowly convinced him this was far more than a passing. The afternoon clinic visit arrived all too fast. Inside the exam, fluorescent lighting hummed. The pediatrician asked gentle, routine questions about sleep, appetite, and Lila answered in short, careful sentences. She held her real memories tightly locked away behind a wall of. She could not tell the doctor about dying young in her past, could not describe years of being invisible in this very. When pressed about why she avoided her brothers, she said, "I don't want to." The doctor made note, recommended consistent therapy, and told Lila's parents the little girl was carrying significant emotional stress. No magic existed, warned. Healing was. On the drive home, the minivan rode thick with unspoken frustration. Once back in the house, the brothers' heart pulled in opposite directions by their own. Jasper was consumed, replaying every careless slight. He kept turning Lila's supermarket line over and over, mind, tormented. Yet he still did not dare knock on the door, terrified of pushing her into. Miles retreated to his room with the old family. He kept returning to that one lonely snapla, and the unsettling thought he wanted to hide, but he knew there was no safe way to phrase such an What do you say to a 6-year-old you suspect holds memory of life? Bliss. He kept small, quiet offerings stacked outside the door, a fresh crayons, animal, a drawing. Most days the gifts. Cooper grew worn thin by the constant weight of. He hated feeling like the whole family's problems revolved around one little pain. Further away, spending most of his time shut in the basement video games, escaping the heavy atmosphere. It was real, yet he lacked the emotional maturity to sit with it. Even remorse for him. Ethan buried himself in research about childhood trauma and wounds. He read through page after advice, searching for a step-by-step solution that simply did not exist. First time, he was forced to admit his logical approach could not repair this broken. No checklist, no intentions, could erase. After dinner, Mrs. Marlowe sat at the kitchen table going over insurance paperwork for the visits. Mr. Marlowe at the counter, his voice low. I never realized she was. We were all swamped with work, chasing deadlines, running to practices. We thought as long as she had food and a room, fine. Regrets in his tone. They had provided physical needs, yet completely missed her. Upstairs, Lila in the guest room bed, staring out the window at. She had hoped for safety. Instead, she was trapped in the same house, surrounded by the same people who had her once before. Her secret rang at the edges, or had heard her slip. Miles said something impossible. Doctors keep asking her to open up. Every path felt lined with risk. For a while, she felt herself sink into despair. What if nothing ever changed? Would always be invisible or locked away, no matter what did. Then slowly, that despair into quiet resolve. She would depend on her brothers, or to save her. She could not wait around for them to find how to love her properly. Safety for herself, no matter whether her understood her. Remorse from the people who hurt never erase her pain, did not need their guilt. She needed cross. Down in the living room, Miles found a crumpled piece of construction paper tucked with the photo album. It was an old drawing, years before Lila's rebirth. Stick figure versions of the 5 brothers across the top of the page, brown colors filling their bodies. Down in the very bottom corner, small cut off by the paper edge, was his own stick figure, almost forgotten, margins of her own work. His throat tight. This was proof in crayon, a silent artifact of how she had seen all along. Carried the drawing upstairs, guest room door. He did not knock. He simply set the art down on the hallway carpet several feet. From behind closed wood, Lila heard the soft set on the floor. She waited until his footsteps faded away before she crept forward enough to peek out. She spotted the drawing sitting there. She knelt and picked it up, her finger with the faded wax crayon. Outside in the house lay quiet. All her external sources dull and unreliable. Chest, something had shifted. She would survive this house, not by begging for their, but by protecting herself. The old Lila, if their attention was truly gone. What remained was a little girl determined to save no matter what came next. The days blurred into a quiet, uneasy rhythm inside the Marlowe home. Lila still slept in the guest room, keeping the lock turned every night. She moved through the house like a soft shadow, emerging only for meals or to use the bathroom, speaking in short, measured sentences. The therapy referral was processed, and their mother spent evenings sorting through copay paperwork and appointment reminders. No magical shift had happened. Guilt lingered among the brothers, but guilt alone could not rewrite old habits. Lila stopped waiting for someone else to fix her world. Instead, she claimed small, tangible pieces of safety for herself. She kept a small canvas tote bag in the guest room, filled with her favorite picture book, a worn hairbrush, and a few simple snacks she quietly gathered from the kitchen pantry. It was her emergency kit. If things ever spiraled badly again, she would have what she needed close at hand. She did not plan to run away, not exactly, but the bag gave her a quiet sense of control over her own circumstance, something she had never held in her past. Downstairs, the brothers struggled with what real amends should look. Ethan had finally let go of his search for a perfect solution. He understood now that he could not reason Lila out of her. He stopped pushing for long conversations or forced heart-to-heart. Instead, he tried small, unobtrusive gestures. When he made himself coffee in the early morning, he would set a small glass of cold orange juice on the kitchen, within easy reach of where Lila usually, then walk away without saying. No expectation, no demand for her to talk. He just wanted her to know someone was thinking, without crowding into her. Jasper wrestled with his own wrestling. He ached to apologize face to face, to pour out all his tangle, but he recognized that dumping his remorse onto a 6-year-old would only place more weight on her shoulders. One afternoon, he found himself out in the back, raking fallen autumn leaves into big crinklings. The sky was pale, and sharp, cool wind bit at it. He did not expect Lila to come, yet after he heard the back door latch click soft. Lila had slipped. She kept a good distance from them, hovering near the wooden back. She would rake, but Jasper's hands stilled around. His first instinct was to go over, to beg for this. He bit back. Instead, he just working, raking slow, steady strokes, letting her choose whether to stay or leave. For several minutes, they existed in the same outdoor space without exchanging a single word. Crunch of leaves, distant chirps, the faint hum of a neighbor's lawnmower drifted a fence. It was the first time since that explosive night in the living room that they occupied the same room without tension. Miles wandered out through the back door. He spotted Lila on the He had left the crayon drawing before, and he wondered. He simply sat down on the porch, far in her, and opened. He did not try to engage. Present, respecting the invisible boundary she. Bo came outside carrying a crumpled paper. He held it up, put it into the wind, and it looped and dipped across the yard before crashing into a leaf pile. Toward Lila, half hoping she might show even of interest. When she gave no reaction, not push, he just retrieved the again. The heavy atmosphere wore on him. He could not stand the constant quiet to do better. It felt as if every small mistake from years ago was dragged into the light. He felt sorry, but he could not bring himself to sit in the discomfort long stretches. Most of his afternoons vanished down in the basement. Out in the yard, Jack aside. He sat on a worn stone, still I don't want you to forgive us, he said quietly, letting the words. I just wanted you to know. I think about times we ignored you. Back. Lila's gaze stayed fixed on the bare branches of the old at the edge of the yard. Turned toward him. What I know. There was no anger in Jasper's voice now. Acceptance. I wanted you to hear it. The moment hung air. Not reconciliation. It was not healing. The very first time, one of her met her where she was. Without demanding, she become. Inside the house, Ethan went through his bedroom. He had been through school papers, and he uncovered a notes. Notes Lila had slipped on doors years ago. Short, childish scrawling someone to play, to read her as her. Back then, he had tossed them aside, too busy with college applications and dead tension. He had completely forgotten existed until this moment. His throat tightened as he had one scrap after another. Every small plea for connection dismissed. This was tangible proof separately she had reached out, again and downstairs. He did not march over to throw them to her. That would be forcing her to all that longing once more. Instead, he put in a plain manila, sealed it shut, and set it all closet. He would keep them. Again. Back in the backyard, sunlight glowed toward the tree line. He stood from the porch step, turned and walked back toward the guest room. She had not smiled, not accepted any apology, so had not fled in panic. Balance had shifted subtly. Others could offer remorse, but Lila alone held any part of it. Boys drifted back indoors. Miles, Jasper, and Ethan aside in the hallway out from the guest room. Forgive. He stayed. That count thing. Jasper nodded. Knees lingered deep inside him. He knew their quiet attempts were fragile. One misstep, one thoughtless old habit, everything could shatter all over again. There was no guarantee slow, cautious progress would hold. The question hanging over simple and unavoidable. Would their family be able to unlearn years of neglect? Or would old patterns creep back, edge of guilt faded away? Weeks ticked by. Lila's first official child therapy appointment came and went. She sat across from the therapist's soft office cushions, answering questions with careful, neutral words. She spoke of feeling lonely, of wanting more space, but guarded the full truth of her rebirth locked deep inside. The therapist told Mr. and Mrs. Marlowe that meaningful change would require the whole household to adjust, not just the little girl carrying the hurt. That message echoed through every corner of the Marlowe home, pushing the family toward a long-overdue, serious conversation. Mrs. Marlowe called for a full family meeting one Saturday evening. She cleared off the dining room table, stacked away mail and grocery receipts, and asked everyone to take a seat. Even Cooper, who had been hiding away in the basement most days, was summoned upstairs. The overhead dining room light cast flat, unforgiving brightness over all their faces. Lila hesitated in the doorway, unsure whether to join. Her mother pulled out a chair at the far end of the table, the spot farthest from her 5 brothers, and told her she could sit there if she wished. No pressure to participate, no demand to... Lila slid quietly into the... Her emergency tote bag left safely tucked inside the guest room down the hall. Mr. Marlowe opened the discussion, his voice heavy with regret. The therapist made it clear. We cannot keep living the way we have. For years, our whole household revolved around the boys' schedule. Sports practice, college application, friend gather. Lila's needs kept getting pushed to... That stopped. A quiet stir moved through the... Ethan nodded. Jasper stared down at the grain of the wooden table. Miles kept his gaze steady. Bo twisted the hem of his sweatshirt and his... Cooper shifted uncomfortably. Old privileges they had taken for granted their whole lives were about to be rearranged. Mrs. Marlowe laid out new household ground rules written down on a sheet of notebook paper. No more entering Lila's space without explicit, whether it was the room or any other room she... Everyone must pause before entering her. Her quiet request for alone time would be respected with argument. Family activities would no longer automatically center on what they wanted. Weekend plans would have to account for what Lila felt comfortable. Cooper was the first. So every single thing we do has to revolve out. Can't have friends over without worrying about something. It isn't about revolve her, Miles answered before their parent. It's about stopping us from revolving only ourselves. We never used to ask what. Tension spiked table. Cooper's jaw tightened, but he did not fire. Deep down he knew it was right, yet surrendering long-held tongue. Ethan. He told the family about the stack of old handwritten he'd found, the childish scraps Lila had slipped under bedroom door. He did not bring the ending. Described them. She reached over, never saw it. Then, shed. The guilt he carried had softened into sin. What we did. But I can watch for the moments when she's to say something. Well, I can stop brushing her off like convenience. Nodded eagerly. Every single time. Even if I just... The conversation served more than an hour. Excuses rose up, away one by one. Bit by bit, every member of the family was forced to confront how their small, everyday choices had piled up into emotional harm. Lila herself barely said throughout the whole meeting. She simply observing, judging whether these new promises turn into real action. She promises before life. Promise. Meeting broke up. Changed routines. Knocks echoed in the upstairs hallway before brother opened a door. Weekend were discussed openly, rather than discussing the boys first. When over to the house, the brothers made an effort not to fill every room with loud noise. Lila. Still, old instincts fought holes. More than once, one of the boys almost back into old habits, reaching for her hair without asking, starting to speak. Each time another brother stepped in to stop it, a quiet reminder had all made. The slow progress lay the brother spoke in fear. What if even all enough? What if Lila would never let them close again? That secret worry gnawed most her and Miles. Jasper still replayed that chill in his head. Miles thought of the crayon drawing, still wondered about memory to hold. Neither dared voice those haunting moments. One night, when else had gone to bed, the 5 brothers gathered in the dining room. The television was off, game consoles silent. Only a single weak floor lamp cast warmth on their faces. All these new rules, all this adjusting, Cooper said quietly. No longer, just worn out. Moves out of the guest room, or trusts any of us again. No answer for him. Ethan leaned to the block wall. We don't get to demand trust. Trust is something we might over months or years, or we might never earn it at all. It's the price of what we did. Miles folded his arms, but she us every day, whether we actually keep our word, or if this is fresh. Upstairs, behind the locked guest room, Lila lay awake. She could hear their basement conversation, but she understood exactly what hung in the balance. The household rule. Or trying. Still, she knew paper rules and evening meetings meant long-term behavior. A choice waited ahead of her. Every wall raised forever, or she could crack open a tiny sliver of ability. For her. Downensper exhaled slowly. Whatever comes next, go back to how things used to be, even if she never forgives us. The weight of truth settled over all 5 brothers. The old family dynamic, fully and fully. There was no turning back. The final confrontation was drawing near. Everything they had built with small gestures would be put to the test. Lila would soon have to decide how much of her she was willing to risk inside this family. Autumn twilight spilled through the living room windows, painting long, muted streaks across the same worn sectional couch where everything had begun months earlier. The heater hummed its familiar low drone, the same background noise from that fateful night when 6-year-old Lila had spoken her quiet, devastating wish. Saturday evening had settled over the Marlowe house, and every member of the family had gathered downstairs. No one had called a formal meeting. They had simply gravitated into this room, drawn toward the unresolved tension hanging over their home. Lila came down from the guest room of her own free will. She had left her emergency tote bag tucked safely beneath the guest room bed upstairs. Her small feet padded softly across the carpet. Instead of slipping off into a far corner to observe silently, she stopped near the center of the living room. Mrs. Marlowe sat on one end of the sofa, Mr. Marlowe beside her. Ethan, Jasper, Miles, Cooper, and Bo spread out across cushions and floor space. All 5 brothers turned their eyes toward her the moment she stepped into view. The new household rules had been in place for weeks. They had practiced knock. They had given her space. They had surrendered old privileges. Now the moment had arrived when all those small gestures would be. Jasper was the first to break the hug. His hands rested loose between his knees, his voice steady but heavy. We've changed how we do things around. We follow the rules. But I know rules on paper aren't. I still keep thinking about what you said at the grocery. That line about that life-killing. A sharp stillness fell over. Mr. and Mrs. Marlowe exchanged a confused. Jasper had never repeated that strange sentence to their parents. Lila's shouldered. She had known this question would surface. She could not tell them about Earth, about dying young and another. That truth was too dangerous to sound, but she could lay bare the weight of her suffering without naming the supernatural. I can't explain that sentence the way you would. Her small voice clear in the calm. But I can tell you what. To stand at his house, day, and visible, to call your names and answer, to draw pictures looked at, to slip notes under doors that go away, to go to bed lonely, wondering if anybody would notice if I just stopped. Bo's eyes listening. Cooper stayed on the floor, tight. Shame burned best. Miles thick. Every memory of brushed-off moments rose fresh and we didn't see it was. Ethan quietly. We were wrapped up in lives. That no excuse. I wrote. The lost aside. I keep it away now. I will never throw away something you. It wasn't. Lila turned her gaze toward her father. Mom and Dad were hard. You gave me food and a roof, but you never saw me I was either. You assumed if I was fine. Quiet doesn't fine. Mrs. Marlowe's eyes filled with tears. She leaned forward slightly. Grief etched into her face. Oh, baby, we failed you. We thought meeting your physical was all that mattered. Missed your heart. Mr. nodded slowly. Pain was his features. That's on us. All of us. Jasper leaned, his tone raw. I want to make this right. But every time I think about all the years, I hate myself. I keep wishing over. Shook her head firmly. The same unyielding certainty from that first words. Write the past. You cannot take the loneliness that already happened. Forget how it felt. It hurt. Cooper spoke up then, for the first without defensiveness. What do you want from us then? If forget something you can give. Lila paused, answering. I don't demand forever with guilt. Guilt burden to carry, not mine. What I want is simple, before you come into my space. When I say I want to be alone, stop assuming you know what I need. Me even when I am quiet. Check my boundaries every single day. Not just when you feel guilty, just during all the time. It hung heavy in the twilight air. This was not a grand, tearful recreation where everyone embraced wounds vanished. Not granting them absolution. She was laying out the non-negotiable home together. Sat on the carpet. Can we ever be some just housemates? Someday? I don't. Lila Anthony. Maybe someday. Maybe never. That choice me. You have to be okay with it. No brother pushed her for more. There was no begging for hugs, no sister-brother closeness. Now that trust could not, only earned at all. Tears from her cheeks. We will do exactly what you ask. Every one of us, however long it takes. One by each of the brothers gave quiet agreement. Ethan, Jasper, Miles, Bo. Even Cooper, who had resisted change the longest, nodded his assent. The core conflict that had torn the household apart was climax right there in that living room. The old dynamic was completely dead. No more little chasing scraps of affection from her family, and would meet her on her own terms. Lila did not rush to hug him. She did not break down crying, but the tight tension drained out of her small frame. The great crushing weight of keeping on bottled alone had lifted action. She had, and the whole family had heard it, deepened outside the window. The room grew dimmer. Lila took one step backward toward the hallway. She would still return to sleep in the guest room tonight. Healing would not arrive a single evening. Old scars would remain. Recognition was decided. As she turned to leave the living room, Jasper spoke a sentence into the fading light. Next, thank you for truth. Lila did not reply. She simply walked toward hers. The decisive battle was over. What came next would be the slow, messy work of living with the consequences of everything that had been said. Another late autumn evening settled over the Marlowe house, months removed from the night Lila had stood in this same living room and said she no longer wanted her brother's love. The overhead lamp cast soft golden light across the familiar sectional. The heater rumbled gently inside the walls, that same steady background hum that had witnessed every hard conversation, every fracture and fragile small step forward. A light dust of snow flurries drifted down outside the windows, the first faint hint of approaching winter. Time had not erased the past. No magic healing had washed away old wounds. Lila still carried every sharp memory of her prior lonely life deep inside, but the household had settled into a new, quiet rhythm built around respect rather than forced affection. She no longer locked herself inside the guest room every single night. Some evenings she slept there. Other nights she chose her original bedroom down the hall. The emergency tote bag still sat tucked under the guest room bed, kept as a quiet safeguard, a reminder that she would never surrender her right to feel safe. She had not thrown it away, and she never would. The old crumpled crayon drawing Miles had left for now sat framed on her bedroom nightstand. The tiny, marginalized stick figure of herself still sat pressed near the paper's edge. It was not decor for happiness. It was proof of where she had been. Ethan's sealed envelope full of her long-ago handwritten notes remained high on the hall closet, preserved, never tossed out again. Those ghosts of her old longing were not buried or forgotten. They were. The 5 brothers had all changed, though their growth looked different for each. Ethan no longer searched for logical, quick-fix solutions to emotional. He had learned to sit with uncertainty, to offer quiet space instead of speeches. Jasper no longer burned under crushing volatility. He still felt remorse, but he channeled it into small, consistent daily choices. Knocking before entering, pausing to listen when she never pushing for more connection than she was willing. Miles continued to wonder about the impossible weight lie. He never asked aloud about rebirth or past lives. He understood some truths were not his. His care showed itself in quiet sitting nearby without demanding confidence. Cooper had made the slowest progress. There were days he slipped back into old selfishness, moments he grew frustrated by the household's needs, but when he stumbled, he no longer lashed out. He would apologize plainly, and Bo still folded paper airplanes and drew pictures. He left them, accepting when she chose not. He celebrated the small, rare moments when she glanced at work and expected. Mr. and Mrs. Marlowe had rearranged long-standing families. They still worked their jobs, but they guarded time to check in with Lila, separate from the chaos surrounding us. They did not pressure her to be more outgoing. This evening, the family drifted into the living room. No formal called. There was no grand emotion planned. Lila wandered in carrying a picture book and settled onto the She did not huddle in the corner. She sat among them, but kept a comfortable gap of empty cushion space between herself. Jasper flipped on and low to a muted nature documentary and sports. Bo folded a paper airball. My back. Ethan scrolled lightly through college planning documents. Cooper game. Mrs. Marlowe folded clip. No one rushed. No one begged for her length. They simply occupied together. That alone would have been unthinkable on that terror. After a while, lecture book. She looked slowly across each one. I remember everything, softly. None of the oldness disappears. But it does not have to rule a single day anymore. Jasper, we know. Forget. Say I love you, Lila continued, honest and not yet. Maybe I never will, but I don't wish to run from this house anymore. It is enough for now. The gently in the warm air. There was no group hug. A quiet settled over the room. They had not earned the perfect once wished for. It earned her presence. That was for. Later, as the night deepened, people drifted in at a time. Lila chose her original room tonight. At her door, she paused. She glanced toward the guest room. That space had been through all the worst days. It would be there, waiting, if she ever needed it again. She closed her bedroom door, and this time she into place. The living room grew quiet. The television turned off, kept its soft rumble. Snow fell against the dark windows. The family would still make mistakes. Old habits creep back in from time to time. Healing stretched them, slow and unfinished. The wounds from years of neglect, few short months. But the door was gone forever. Lila had not found the fairy tale in her past life. In something far more real. The right to be seen, the right to set her own limits, and the quiet to decide in her own time what relationship, if any, she wanted to build with the 5 brothers looked her entirely.